So glad that you guys chose to spend part of your weekend with us, and welcome to week 3, episode 3 of our series, Relational Vampires, Loving the People Who Suck the Life Out of You. And as we were planning this series, I thought there'd be no better voice for us to hear and to listen from than my good friend, Jeff Newton. If you don't know Jeff, you probably haven't been in Kokomo very long, is probably what it was. But anyway, if you don't know Jeff, Jeff actually is a retired United Methodist pastor. He is the founder of Kokomo Urban Outreach, one of our nonprofit partners here at Bridgeway. And him and his wife attend church here since he's retired. And I've had the privilege of actually serving on the Kokomo Urban Outreach board for, I think, over 10 years now. And so I've been able to be in rooms learning from and leading with this man, and he's one of my heroes, and I'm not just saying that because he's up here with me. He's a hero who, my favorite type of hero is actually a hero maker, somebody who likes to point the spotlight on other people and make heroes out of others. And so will you guys just join me in welcoming Jeff to teach us today? Thanks, man.
Thank you, Joel. It's great to be here today. Excuse me. Sorry. It's great to be here today. That same thing happened in the first service. Anyway, I'm good now, I think. So I don't know how many of you tried to figure out how to help people. You know, have you ever seen needy people that have needs, not necessarily just people that are in poverty, but just anybody that has a need? Sometimes they're so needy, they keep asking you for things over and over and over again. You don't know what to do. And it feels like sometimes they're sucking the life out of you. So today, we're going to talk about that a little bit today and try to figure out how we can really help people in the best possible way. Now, I have friends. I have one friend in particular. Whenever he sees somebody on the street holding a sign or anywhere, somebody approaches him, he gives them money every time. Then I have other friends who, another friend in particular, who refuses even to look at the person and just walks on by. And then I'm kind of in the middle. I kind of just like, should I help or not? And I start asking myself all these questions. I wonder what they're really going to do with the money. I wonder what they're going to, if I help them this week, what they're going to do next week. Help them this meal, what they're going to do next meal. Or I think, are they trying to pull the wool over my eyes? Or are they going to, are they really worthy to receive anything from me? And I ask myself all those questions. In the midst of asking myself all those questions, you're kind of frozen in time and you do nothing. Anybody like me? Many of us are. Maybe you got to find yourself in one of those 3 places, obviously. Either you're helping all the time, you're not helping at all, or you're not really sure if you should help or not. I know that as I came back, I came to Kokomo 20 years ago. I'm from Kokomo, actually. I grew up in Kokomo. I graduated from the real Kokomo High School downtown. And I was at my last big church, my last full-time church before I came to Kokomo again, was in Lowell, Indiana, up near northwest Indiana, near Chicago. Anybody know Lowell? So it's a town right outside of Chicago. And in that church, it was a big church. It was a traditional church. There were 5 choirs, a gigantic youth group, about 100 kids on every Wednesday night. And it was just a busy place. Plus, it was a bedroom community of Chicago, so many people worked in Chicago. So by the time they got home from work, it was 7, 8 o'clock at night. By the time they got home, and so a lot of the activities at the church didn't start till 8. And that kind of cut into my TV time. But we were on Central Time, so we got a little break there. Having said all that, I was at the church, so a lot of the meetings started at 8 o'clock. I did marriage counseling at 9 o'clock for weddings, and it was just crazy. The schedule was crazy. I would start at 8 o'clock in the morning and go sometimes till 9, 10 at night. I never really left the church. I kind of felt imprisoned in this gigantic cathedral of a church. I kind of felt imprisoned there, and when on Sunday mornings they would say, you got to stand here, you got to move there, don't block that light, don't block the choir, move over here. I would get pretty confused. And after doing all that for a long time, I began to become a little uneasy because I felt called to be with people that didn't know Jesus. I felt called to work outside the walls of the church, and that really wasn't happening because everybody that I knew said they were Christians. They went to church there. I don't know if everybody really was, but they say they were. And they were really good people. I had a good time there. It was just different. And so in the midst of my struggle, I came back to Kokomo on my vacation times, and I would walk the streets of Kokomo. And as I was walking through the streets of Kokomo, I was praying, God, what do you want me to do next? I'm just not feeling right. I know that you called me to do this, but what is it you really want me to do? I just had all these questions. And so I was walking down one street one day, and as I was walking down the street, it seemed like, as I was praying, it felt like the fronts of houses were falling down in front of me, and I could see inside people's houses. And what I saw was dysfunctional families. I saw neglected children. I saw addicted people. I saw people struggling with finances. I saw all these different things in my head, and I heard the Holy Spirit speak to me in a very quiet way. Go back to Kokomo and get the churches out of their buildings into neighborhoods. Amen. I said, God, I can't do that. I'm just one person. There's a lot of churches. And then I heard the Holy Spirit say, if every church, there's a church on every corner, if every church just took their neighborhood, the community would change. So my wife and I packed everything up, and we came back to Kokomo, and we started something called Kokomo Urban Outreach. Some of you have heard of that before. And it's a organization that has been in existence for about 18 years. And the way I started out, the organization, when I founded the organization, started out, I was a pastor, so we would go to the neighborhoods, we would listen to neighbors, and we would respond. We would meet the needs. So if I go somewhere and they said they needed food, we brought food in. Whatever they needed, we brought. And over time, we were doing things like we had giant block parties in 10 or 12 neighborhoods. I can't remember exactly how many now. 10 or 12 neighborhoods, and one of the neighborhoods was Pine Valley. And at the time, Joel was the pastor at Oak Brook Church, and they adopted Pine Valley. So we supplied the food, they put on the meal, and they interacted with the people there, and it was all a good time. And then I invited Joel to come on our board of directors. He's still young, but he was a young pastor then. He was 12 years younger, 12 or 13, whatever it was, 10, 12 years younger. And so I invited him to come, and then when I retired, I came back to church. I started coming to church here because I love the idea of the way you all go out and the way you support organizations like Kokomo Urban Outreach. $10,000 last January. That's amazing. Thank you all. And just different ways. Over the time, there's been like school supplies for our learning centers, food, all kinds of things that's happened. And I appreciate that. But at the beginning, we had the block parties. We had food pantries. We had 5 food pantries across the city, plus rolling food pantries. We had weekend food bags we called buddy bags, and we went out to like 1,200 kids every Friday with 3 meals in every bag. We had clothing giveaways. We had Easter baskets, hats, gloves, anything you needed, we gave it away. And we had a woman named Deanna who coordinated all that food. There was over 1 million pounds of food given away every year, at least. Lots of food. Lots of people being fed. Lots of good things happening, at least we thought. We were a bunch of good-hearted people, and as I reflect back, we were good-hearted people that were, at times, making things worse. How do you make things worse? You're feeding people. That can't be worse. Let me tell you what happened. Let me tell you how I came to the conclusion that maybe it wasn't so great. I was praying. What happened was, after about 10 years of giving things away, we started having the teenagers of the older kids, the teenagers of the families we were helping at the beginning, when we first started 10 years prior. They were coming now back with their babies, and they were asking for the same thing. I thought, what? I thought they should be better. I thought things should be better by now. And we recognized them. They were asking for the same things over and over and over and over again. And so I got the same situation I felt when I was the pastor of the big church. I was uneasy. So whenever I feel uneasy, I pray more than that. But when I'm really uneasy, I really have to spend some time praying. So I was praying one day, and as I was praying, I kind of felt myself on a cruise ship. If you've ever been on a cruise ship has everything, has all kinds of food, everything you need is on a cruise ship, self-contained. So I felt myself on a cruise ship in my prayer time in my head, and I looked over the edge in the water, and I saw people all over the place, treading water, trying to keep their head above the water. I thought, we got to help these folks. So I'd yell down and say, hey, what do you need? And they would say food, and we would go get some food and throw food at them. Then we go to the next person. What do you need? Hey, what do you need? And they would clothes. They throw clothes at them. Hey, what do you need? We throw gift cards for gas, all kinds of things. Whatever they needed, we threw at them. There was nothing that we didn't throw at them. And so I didn't really know what to think of that. So a couple weeks later, I was praying again. And this time I was led to Matthew 25, right here, where Jesus says, when the Son of Man comes in all of his glory, the angels with him, he will sit on his glorious throne, and the nations will be gathered before him, and he'll separate the people one from another. A shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He'll put the sheep on his right and the goats on his left. Then the king will say to those on his right, come, those of you who are blessed by the Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came after me to visit me. Next slide. Then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when did we see you hungry? When did we feed you or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you in prison and visit the sick? And so as I was led to that verse, I was saying, God, that's what we're doing. We're feeding people. We're clothing people. We're talking to people. We're doing everything that you ask us in Matthew 25. So if we're doing all those things, why doesn't it feel right? Why do I feel uneasy? We're doing it. I can prove it. I got the receipts. And then the next verse. The king will reply, truly I tell you, whenever you did to one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did to me. I just kept that in my head. And the next time I went to pray a couple weeks later, I was praying again, still struggling with, are we really helping? And then the Bible says we are, but it doesn't feel right, and the Bible says we are. So then I was praying again, and I was on the cruise ship again, and this time when I was on the cruise ship, there's people in the water just like before, and I yelled down to the first person, I said, hey, what do you need? And when that person looked up, I saw the face of Jesus. And that verse came to me. When you did to the least of these, you did it to me. And then I realized at that moment in time that I would never, ever throw Jesus anything. Hey, Jesus, what do you need? Food. There you go. See you later. I would never do that. I would try to pull Jesus up and put him up on the ship with me. See the difference? And so, having thought that through a little more and prayed it through, I realized we really weren't helping people out of the water. We weren't helping people out of poverty. We were helping people get through poverty, but not out. And so I also then, right after that, I was with Travis Taflinger from Bridges Outreach, and we decided, he had read a book and I read the book, Toxic Charity, and we decided to have a community book reading. We didn't know how many people were going to show up, but we had like 50 people come to this book. They've read the book ahead of time, and we had a discussion. And in Toxic Charity, the whole idea is that you're supposed to help people without hurting them. And how does that work? And in the book, next slide, in the book it says, when you give somebody something one time, they appreciate it, they say thank you. When you give something to somebody, the same thing, to them again, it creates anticipation. They think they're going to keep helping me. When you do it the third time, it creates expectation. You have to help me. When you do it the fourth time, it creates entitlement. You must help me. No questions. And when you do it the fifth time, it creates dependency, and they begin not to be able to do things themselves. And when you get to the sixth, seventh, eighth time, and you say, I'm really sorry we don't have the resources anymore, or you decide you just don't want to help them anymore, you become the bad guy, and you become the one that they say to, you're not really a Christian because you won't help me anymore. But we led them on to believe we would, in reality. Giving things to people doesn't necessarily help them. We're going to talk a little bit more of that in a minute. And so in the Bible, well, before we get to that, we begin to make this change at the outreach. We begin to make this change. I begin to realize the best way to help people maybe wasn't just giving them things, but being with people and listening to people. I was consulting in lots of churches, helping the churches figure out how to get out of their buildings into neighborhoods. And most of the churches wanted to either start a food pantry or they wanted to do a community meal. And so I did work with both. But the community meal is a big one. And I would observe what they were already doing at the community meal. They would have the community come in, and they would have a big long line, and they would serve the food and give them the food, and people go down and eat them. And then people behind the table said, look what we did. We're so great. We fed all these people, right? But I began to realize that helping people in poverty, helping people anywhere, is more like a dance. And in order to have a dance, what do you have to have? Music, right? And so the music I was hearing should have been, have you ever heard, some of you are old enough to know this, but back in the 40s and 50s perhaps, Frank Sinatra and all them, they had the doobie-doobie-doos. You ever remember those? Doobie-doobie-doo? So you have the doobie-doobie-doo. So when you're helping people, it's a doobie-doobie-doo sort of thing. It's a dance. And so you have people doing, serving the food, but you also have people being, sitting down with folks and talking with them, interacting with them, building relationships with them, hearing their stories. You know, everybody has a story and everybody wants to tell their story, but so many people can't or don't have the outlet. So you sit down and you talk with them, and then you have the beers, you have the doers, you have this music going, the doobie-doobie-doos going, and then you start this dance with them, with the folks you're serving, and you let them do the lead. They do the leading. You're not telling them what to do. You're not trying to control them. You're not saying you should do this, you should do that, listen, all that. You're listening to their stories, and you're letting them lead. And then in the churches that I was talking with, I said, now some of you don't have anybody being. There's nobody sitting down with people. All you're doing is doing. So if you take the being out of the song, doobie-doobie-doo, if you take the bees out, what are you left with? Doo-doo. And that's about it. And that's about the way what was going on, because it really wasn't doing anything. It wasn't building any kind of relationship. So if you really want to help people, you have to build relationships with them. You have to listen to them. You have to interact with them. You have to be walking with them. As a matter of fact, the next slide here, Jesus says in Matthew 26, this is right after Matthew 25. Oh, that makes sense, doesn't it? 26 comes after 25. But right after what Jesus said, when you do it to the least of these, you do it to me. He says, the poor you will always have with you, but you will not always have me. But the poor you always have with you. So I saw the word with you. The poor you always have with you. And so over the years, I always thought, well, that means if you solve poverty in one location, there's going to be poverty somewhere else. If you solve it all in Kokomo, there's going to be poverty in Indianapolis. If you solve it in the state of Indiana, it's going to be somewhere else. Or solve it in the United States, it's going to be across the world somewhere else. And you're never going to leave. Poverty is always going to be with you. But that's not what it says. The word with is really important. And there's a Greek word. I've been here a couple too many Sundays, I think. There's a Greek word that's called, I can't hardly say it, methamen. And I wish I could have you all repeat that after me, but if I did, we would all be butchering the Greek language. I don't want to put you in that situation. So it means that you're walking with somebody. And then if you go to the next slide, Matthew 1, the virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel, which means God is with us. With, those two withs are the same. The poor will be with you, and God is with you. When you're with somebody, it means you're walking with them. You're right beside them. You're caring for them, just like Jesus cares for us. Emmanuel, God with us. And so if you're walking with folks and you're listening to folks and you're caring for folks and you're really there with folks, you're building relationships with folks, and you begin not working for people, and that's what tends to happen when we're working for somebody, we begin to work with people. And that's a big shift in thinking and understanding. We're walking with them and listening and interacting. There was a lady a few years ago in the food pantry. She's a volunteer. And she saw a lady come in who had shoes, tennis shoes, and they were duct taped to hold the sole on. It was duct taped around it. And so the lady asked her what size shoes he wore, and the lady told her and didn't think much about it. The next time the lady came into the food pantry to get more food, this volunteer, nice-hearted, kind lady, gave the woman a pair of shoes. And the woman took it, said thank you, took it. Then the next day, the woman who gave the shoes saw the shoes on Facebook Marketplace. She was appalled. The lady sold her brand new shoes. So when the lady comes in, the food pantry guest comes back in the next time, the woman, the volunteer, confronts her and says, why did you sell the shoes I gave you? Look, you still have the same shoes on. And the woman said, I didn't ask for shoes. You didn't ask me for what I needed. You didn't talk to me about it. What I really needed was gasoline money to go to work. I can wear these duct tape shoes, but I can't walk to work, it's too far. So I sold the shoes so I could buy gas for my car, so I could go to work. You see, we make assumptions of what people need. And they don't always need the things that we think that they need, because we're not in relationship with them. We're not talking. And so as I begin to transition the whole organization, Kokomo Urban Outreach was the best, by far, I think, by far the best nonprofit in Kokomo that majored in toxic charity. Helping people, no questions asked. We did a good job at that. And so we began to make this shift. Joel was on the board at that time, he still is, making this shift, and we started to turn this gigantic ship a different direction and what that would look like. And so I talked to a lot of people, a lot of community leaders at the Main Street Cafe with Sandra Young was the owner then, and I would meet with them there. We just had a rotating door. I drank coffee all day and talked to about 180 different leaders about what it would look like if we changed our model, changed the way we help, changed the way we think, and how do we build relationships, and how do we do that? And almost probably 50% of them said, you're right. When you give a person a fish they eat for a day, would you teach a person a fish they eat for a lifetime? I said, that's true. But then I went back to my neighborhood where I lived. I lived right across the street from Garden Square, Gateway Gardens. I lived with folk for 18 years almost. And so I would go back and talk to them, and I would say, so what are we doing? And they would talk, and they would share their stories. And in the midst of their stories, I knew that they knew how to fish. They knew how to work. They knew how to do things. But the problem was, I realized, was they knew how to fish, but they had no access to the ponds. They had no access to where the jobs were. And then I realized this. The materially poor really don't need another pair of used blue jeans or a giant can of ravioli. What they need is our networks. You know how it works. Most of you sitting here knows how it works. A job opens up, a pretty good job opens up. You hear about it. You know the person that owns the business, or you know the manager, or you know another employee there. You call them up and say, hey, I have a son, or I have a friend, or I have a daughter who needs a job. Can you help them get in? And you get them into that job. It's called networking. And most of us in this room can do that really well. But those that struggle don't. So by the time they get to the job, it's taken. They hear a job opening, it's pretty good. They get there and somebody or else already has it. They know how to fish, but they have no access to the pond. And so when you build relationships with folks, you're helping them when they're networking. You're helping them along the way as that way as well. In 2016, the tornado came through Kokomo. Most of you remember that if you were here. And it came through the neighborhood that I lived in, over by Garden Square, and the building we have the program in today. Kokomo Urban Outreach's headquarters is an old church building, and it went through the apartments. And the church, we opened the church building up to the neighbors for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You always help people in the midst of crisis with no questions asked, and there's nothing like that. You just do it. And so we had breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I would sit down with people at their tables. I said, hey, I know that the tornado came through. What do you all really need? And what I was hearing was, we lost hours at our job because our job either is not open because there's no power because of the tornado, or there's a tree on my car, I can't get to work, or we're displaced, and so we can't really get around, and I can't get to work, and I'm going to be short of my paycheck, and rent's due in just it was the end of August, it's due next week, and I don't have the money because my paycheck's going to be short. And I thought, oh. In the past, what I would have done is I would have called churches, which I did. I would just put a call out, and the money came. And I would have sit them down and said, hey, let's fill out this form, and your name and everything on it, and how many hours did you lose, and how much do you make an hour, and give them that much money. And send them on their way. This time I didn't do that because we were making this change. And so this time I said, what we're going to do is we're going to hire anybody that wants to work. You can work for $10 an hour. And you can work up to 50 hours, $500 you can make. If you go to 600, you have to pay tax. They become an employee, so it's $500. And you can come and work every day until you get the 500, and then you got to recover your pay. So they came in droves. Folks came in droves. And we gave them chainsaws and rakes and shovels and lawnmowers and weed eaters, and they cleaned up the neighborhood with the help of the rest of the community. They went into the apartments and swept the glass up and mopped the floors and did all kinds of things for the apartment folk. And so, and they got paid. And they were able to recover their money. There was one guy that I saw working really hard, and I said to him, if you could do anything in the world, what would you do? He said, I would take boys off the streets and teach them how to work. I said, oh, we have a little bit of money left over from this tornado stuff. Let's try that. So we did. We called it Man Up at the time. And we started with just a handful of boys. We were hoping to have 30 boys at the end of a year. We had 30 boys at the end of a month. And they would go out and work and earn money. If you fast forward to 7 years later, we had the same program. It's for boys and girls, so it's not called Man Up anymore. It's just called Up. And boys and girls come, they work. They work 2 hours a week, only 2 hours a week. And they get $10 an hour, so that's $20 for that, or points. They get paid in points. Then they come to a weekly meeting called a huddle, and they get 5 points for that. So in a week, they can earn 25 points or $25. It can be converted to that if they want to later. And then they save their points, so they can, we have a store. They go in the store and buy things from the store. Or they can save their points, and they can get gift cards, redeem them for gift cards in increments of 50. And so we had one kid that bought a car. Right now, there's an 11-year-old kid, 11 years old, who has 1,250 points. That's $1,250. Who would have nothing. Zero. They go out and work in people's yards, and then the people give a donation, and then we also raise money on the side. And generous people like you help as well. And so here's what happens. Here's the difference. Let me tell you the difference. When I first started the program, we had a children's ministry, and we had games. And we had a prize tote. We had just a bucket, a tote, and had prizes in it, toys. And so if you won a game, you got to pick a toy out. So one day, this one boy won a game. And I said, go get a toy. And when he went to the tote, it was empty. I said, oh, that's okay. We have some more toys downstairs in the janitor's closet. As soon as everybody leaves, I'll take you down there, and you can pick a toy out down there. So he was fine with that. We went down there, and when he got into the janitor's closet, he saw the toys in the tote, but he looked up on the shelves, and he saw toilet paper. He said, could I have that instead? I said, what? He said, yeah, could I have that instead? So I said, sure. So I put like 3 rolls in a bag, gave it to him. And I said, I kind of felt bad. He was about 9 years old. I said, you know what? Why don't you go ahead and pick out a toy too? He said, no, this is my prize. This is all my family needs. He wouldn't take a toy. He took it home. So I went to his mom's house during the week to find out what that was all about, because I really didn't know. And she said, well, with food stamps, you cannot buy hygiene things. You only can buy food. You can't buy cleaning supplies or soap, shampoo, toilet paper, anything like that. And so at the end of the month, I run out of money. And so what I teach him to do is go to school. And she says, I tell him that every child deserves 2 napkins. One to wipe your mouth and hands off with after you're done eating. And the other one goes into his pocket. When he comes home from school, I take the napkin out of his pocket and I rip it in thirds. I give him a third, I take a third, and his little brother gets a third. That's how we get through every day. If you fast forward to 2024, we have a store. And inside the store, there is toilet paper and shampoo and soap and food. All the things we give out in food pantries are in the store. Clothes, shoes, underwear, socks, coats, hats. All the clothes are 1 point, $1, 1 point. All the food and hygiene things are 2 things for 1 point. And so kids come in and they buy things their family needs. And instead of going to the pantries, their parents, they're helping their families, and they're feeling good about themselves because they're helping. And they feel good about themselves because they bought it themselves. And so that happens I see it well, I'm not there so much anymore, I'm retired, but when I was there every week, I saw that every single week, kids coming out of the store with that kind of thing. And so there was another boy who goes to a local school, and he needed a new coat really bad. His coat was old and dirty and ripped. It was it was in November, it was getting colder. And one of his teachers, his former teacher, saw it and knew that he was in the Mini Up program, which is for little kids, 3 years old to 9 years old. And they don't really go out and work. They're learning to get ready to go out and work. It's kind of a feeder program for the older kids. And so his teacher called Kareen, who's our program director, and said to Kareen, this kid needs a coat really bad. He said, just tell him to get on the bus, come to the older kid's day to work. I'll take him out and he'll work for the 2 hours. Then I'll bring him back in and he can pick out a coat. And so the kid missed the bus. And he was upset. He said, this is my only chance to get a coat. I'm supposed to come today to get a coat. What am I going to do? And one of the teachers that knows him called the outreach, found out where the job was, drove him to the job, dropped him off. And then this happened right afterwards.
Something that you don't hear every day. How old are you?
9.
So you telling me that you went outside, you worked really hard, you came back and you bought this here coat yourself?
Yes, I did.
How old are you?
9.
9 years old, and you went outside, you worked, you came back, and you purchased your own coat by yourself.
Yep, I did.
You don't hear that every day.
You think his self-esteem is better? What do you think is better for this boy? Just hand him in a coat, or teach him how to work for a coat? Which was better? This was better. He has self-esteem raises. He did it himself. No handouts. Then Thanksgiving time, we have a deal where you can buy a whole Thanksgiving dinner for 20 points, which is like a day's work. And so you get the turkey, the dressing, the green beans, the butter, even the pan to put it in. You get about $100 worth of food for 20 points or $20. So kids come all over the place. And so there's this kid this kid here, he purchased this, but before he got it, he went to his mom and said, Mom, this year we are not going to eat at the rescue mission for Thanksgiving Day. I got us. He bought the food, and he would not let anybody carry it. He insisted on carrying all that out himself. And so on that day, he felt like a man. He felt like a provider. His self-esteem raised. He paid for his family to eat. It felt great. So when you're helping people, you have to think about the results of it. You have to think about the connection. And even our staff, even adults, we have a staff, and some of the people on the staff had struggled in the past. One of those persons is Kareen, who is a friend of mine, and he's also a program director there. Kareen has a great story, and if you want to hear Kareen's story, you should go to the Atypical podcast that Joel did, because he just did one last week with Kareen. And Kareen tells a story. So if you want to hear a story, it's a story of redemption. Let's just say that. And if you can listen to that story. But Kareen wasn't networked anywhere. And I wasn't networked on the streets. He was. He's from the streets. At the time, he was 27. He's 33 today. At the time, he was 27. And so I was able to work with him and help him with donors and help him understand volunteers and introduce him to people in the community and connected him with the networking by listening to what he was interested in. And we networked together. Now when he goes into a community meeting, everybody's coming up to him. They all know him. And when he's on the streets, he was known differently, much differently. And they all know him. But at the same time, he's teaching me street slang. I know I can understand what the kids are saying. I don't speak it because it sounds kind of silly coming from an old man, but I can understand it, and nobody's going to get anything over on me. I know what all the words mean, and so he's taught me that. He's taught me how to interact. He's taught me about the culture. He's helped me understand. And because we've had that relationship, I understand poverty even deeper and better. And he understands middle class deeper and better. And about, I would say 6 months ago, he came to me and he said, I think his wife works at Chrysler. And they have no children, and he works at the outreach. And he came to me and he said, I think I'm in middle class now. I said, Kareen, you've been in middle class for 6 years. And he said, really? I said, by finances, yeah, but your mind hasn't been. And we were able to flip the switch. Things changed for the best. So after reading the book and after making the changes and beginning to do it, I began to ask myself a lot of questions. And I began to realize that after 10 years, not today, but after 10 years, people were, I would come home to my wife. I'd actually said this several times. Those people are sucking the life out of me. those people are taking advantage of me. Those people don't even say thank you. Those people those people that. I realize my neighbors, I used to call my neighbors, now it's become those people. We start referring to them as those people. They're not humans anymore. And I realized my attitude was in the wrong place. My attitude was not where we're supposed to be, where it needed to be. I wasn't feeling good about myself anymore. I was feeling like defeated, and I was feeling like things were not going well. And in reality, as I look back on those times, I realized that they weren't sucking the life out of me, but I was sucking the life out of them because I enabled them to stay where they were. I needed to keep people in poverty in order to keep a job. I needed to keep people where they were in order to continue to help and to feel good about myself. And to say, look what I'm doing. I'm helping all these people. We're feeding all these people. We're doing all these great things. We're doing all this stuff. And that built my self-esteem up. And I realized I was hurting people to help me. Ooh. That's huge. For me, it was. In the book, Robert Lupton's Toxic Charity, it says this. It says, giving to those in need what they could be gaining from their own initiative may be the kindest way to destroy people. If people can do things on their own, they should do it. If they can't do it on their own, you help them to learn how to do it on their own. A good example of that is a kid that I know knows how to tie their shoes. I've seen him tie his shoes before. He often will come to me when I was working. He'd often come to me and say, will you tie my shoe? I looked at him and said, why would I tie your shoe? Tie your own shoe. Because I knew if I tied his shoe, he would just keep coming back. Will you tie my shoe? Will you tie my shoe? You know how to tie your shoes. Tie your own shoe. The same thing happens with people that are needy. Not just in poverty, but just needy in general. When you continuously feed the need, they're just going to continue to come back and they're going to continue to stay where they are. And it's not helpful. As a matter of fact, it can be very hurtful. I realized for me, I'm talking about me today, I realized for me I was addicted to helping. I got the adrenaline going when I was helping. I got the adrenaline going when I could go to report at community meetings. We just provided 1,200 buddy bags this week to all these kids and all these schools, and aren't we great? I realized that my motivations were not in the right place. I realized that. And so we had to check our attitudes, check the way we're thinking, check our motivation. Years ago, we had an Easter basket workshop where people came through and they made their own Easter baskets. And we did 600 people the last year we did it. So 600 people came through and they got everything for an Easter basket, made it for every kid in their house. We had to make 600 of those. And they got to pick out the toys and the candy and all that. Then we started this process with the board of directors. We started moving the ship. And so one of the things I did was cut off the Easter basket workshop. I said, this year we're not going to do that. We're going to take the $3,000 we spent on chocolate rabbits, and we're going to hire 3 kids for the summer and call it my first job and give each kid $1,000 for working all summer long. And they mowed the grass, did all kinds of stuff. We're going to teach them how to work. It's going to be my first job. It was a prequel to the UP program. And so it was all great until I got a phone call from a volunteer. And she said, you run my Easter. I said, I don't even hardly know you. How did I run your Easter? She said, you stopped the Easter basket workshop. How am I going to feel good about Easter if I don't give a basket to a poor kid?
Oh my goodness.
I said, well, if you really want to feel good about it, maybe you go to church and worship the resurrected Jesus. That might make you feel good. That might be a good thing to do. It's kind of sarcastically, I know. But having said that, we all have to check our motivations. We all have to ask, are we really sucking the life out of people by helping them too much? What's our motivations? What's the end result of our help? What's our attitude? I am Methodist, and John Wesley is the founder of Methodism. His big thing, and this is every Methodist pastor, Wesleyan, every Methodist pastor knows this. He says, whatever you do, do no harm. Whatever you do no harm. In your preaching, whatever you're doing, do no harm. And so we have to keep that in our head when we're helping people. We don't want to hurt them. We don't want to harm them. We want the very best for them. And then we have to ask ourselves this. Are we simply throwing things to people to get the either two reasons, get them out of our way, here you go, see you later, or to make ourselves feel good? Are we throwing things to people, or are we trying to pull them out? Are we really trying to help them? So today the big challenge is we think about all the people trying to suck the life out of us. But ask yourself, and I've asked myself, am I sucking the life out of other people unintentionally with a good heart because I love people, but am I really helping?